Hello there, my sleepy nights. And tonight, we journey into the dark and mystical world of The Witcher. In this special collection, I bring you a series of Witcher-inspired stories that delve into the heart of the continent, capturing the essence of Geralt of Rivia's world. And if you enjoy this Witcher collection, please remember to like, subscribe, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. You can support us on our Patreon, where you get access to our Spotify playlist and early access to all of these stories. But for now, let's get cozy and step into the enchanting and perilous world of The Witcher. Caelford, a city of wealth and shadows, spread out beneath the dim autumn sky. The sea breeze carried the scent of salt and trade, mingling with the distant sound of waves. Geralt rode through the gates, the rhythmic clop of roaches' hoofs, a steady contrast to the bustle around him. Though the streets were wide and clean, and the towers shone in the pale light, there was an unease in the air, the kind only those trained in the craft of hunting could sense. He made his way through the main boulevard, his gaze flicking over the market stalls and nobles passing by in their gilded carriages. Eyes followed him, some curious, others wary. Witchers did not frequent places like this unless something dark lurked beneath the surface. The palace, towering and pristine, loomed at the center of the city. Its white stone walls gleamed, but even from here, Geralt could feel the tension emanating from within. As the guards opened the iron gates without question, he caught the fleeting glances they exchanged. Eyes that lingered too long, shoulders a touch too rigid. Inside the palace, the corridors were long and cold, lined with statues of past rulers, their faces stern in judgment. The steward leading Geralt said nothing, his footsteps echoing off the polished stone floors, each sound magnifying the quiet tension. When the heavy doors to the throne room swung open, the weight of the air shifted. Something awaited him here, something heavier than the usual contracts. Queen Sabina sat upon her throne, her silhouette sharp against the backdrop of dim light and high ceilings. She was dressed in muted regal colours, the crown on her brow gleaming faintly. Her face was old, expressionless, save for the dark circles beneath her eyes, signs of sleepless nights, of a burden weighing her down. "Witcher," she greeted him. "I had wondered how long it would take for my summons to reach you." Geralt said nothing, letting the silence press forward. "I shall not waste your time with formalities," she continued, slowly rising from her throne. "My daughter, Illyria, lies in a sleep no healer can break. No magic I possess has lifted it." She walked towards him, her eyes hard as flint, though her steps were careful, measured. "I have been told of curses, of bindings, but none can say for certain what it is." Geralt's gaze remained steady, waiting for more. He had seen royal courts before. Those polished veneers often hid the rot underneath. This place was no different. "There are rumors," she said. "My son, Alaric, has grown distant these past few weeks. He was once our greatest warrior, but now something has changed him." The pause lingered, her next words left unsaid, but clear enough. She did not need to say she feared Ulrich might have a hand in whatever curse lay upon her daughter. She did not need to ask what Geralt already understood. "There is a price for such things," Geralt said. "You understand that?" Sabina's eyes sharpened. For the first time, there was a crack in her composure. "I am prepared to pay it, whatever it may be. My daughter's life hangs in the balance. This kingdom does, too." For a moment, the air between them stilled, heavy with the weight of what lay unspoken. There were darker forces at work here. Geralt could feel it, and they ran deeper than any simple curse. Whatever game was being played, it was larger than just the Queen's children. It always was. The corridors of Caelford's palace were a labyrinth of twisting stone hallways and narrow passages. And as Geralt made his way through them, coldness of the air seemed to deepen. The flickering torchlight barely reached the corners, leaving long shadows in their wake. He followed the steward's silent lead until they reached a narrow door set into the stone wall. Its frame, adorned with faint etchings of ruins, long faded by time. "Magician Maron waits for you," the steward said softly, before turning and retreating back into the maze. Geralt pushed open the door, entering a chamber filled with sharp, pungent scents of herbs and candle smoke. Shelves lined the walls, cluttered with ancient scrolls, jars of strange ingredients, and intricate charms made from bone and metal. In the center of the room stood Maron, the court magician. An old man with a gaunt face, eyes sunken deep into his skull. He looked up from a low wooden table where various powders and stones were scattered in deliberate patterns. "Witcher," Maron rasped, "I have been expecting you." Geralt nodded, but said nothing, his eyes sweeping over the room. Something about this place made his Witcher medallion hum faintly, like the low thrum of a distant storm. Maron's bony fingers traced one of the stones on the table. "The princess is under a binding curse," he said, not looking up. "Of that I'm certain." Geralt stepped forward. "What kind of curse?" "A tethering, I believe," Maron replied, his eyes meeting Geralt's at last. "Her life force is bound to something else, though what it is I am not so sure. The source remains hidden from my sight. Whoever wove this spell is powerful, more powerful than I have ever encountered." Geralt's jaw tightened slightly. Binding magic was no small feat, especially if it had eluded the talents of a seasoned magician like Maron. "The Queen fears her son may be involved," Geralt said, his voice low, watching for Maron's reaction. But the magician's gaze did not waver. "Ulrich, I cannot say what he may or may not be capable of. War has changed him, yes. But if this curse is his doing, it is not by his own hand. He has neither the knowledge nor the power to cast such a powerful spell." Geralt regarded him silently, sensing there was more to be said. There is a legend, Marin continued, his voice dropping lower. The legend of the Veil Stone. At the mention of the name, the air in the room seemed to grow colder. Geralt had heard fragments of such a tale in passing, ancient and nearly forgotten. The Veilstone was not spoken of openly, even among the learned. A forbidden artifact, Marin said, his eyes narrowing. It is said to have the power to control life forces, to bind souls. If the Veilstone has been unearthed, then we shall face something far darker than a mere curse. It is a magic that defies nature itself. Geralt's eyes gleamed, but he remained silent, processing the implications. A power like that would not be sought lightly, nor would it be easy to find. If the Veilstone had indeed resurfaced, it meant something far more dangerous was at play. Where is it? Geralt asked quietly. No one knows, Marin replied, shaking his head. It was sealed away centuries ago by those who feared its power. But rumors have surfaced, whispers of it being uncovered in the north, though none can confirm the truth. The Witcher nodded. The path was clearer now, but darker still. The palace barracks were quieter than Geralt had expected. Rows of armor stood gleaming, untouched, like statues in waiting. The soldiers moved about their duties, but there was a weariness in the air, an unspoken tension. Geralt walked slowly through the halls, his presence commanding a wide berth as was usual. He had come to seek out those who had fought beside Prince Ulrich, those who might know what had driven the war hero into the shadows. He found them gathered in the training yard, where wooden dummies stood riddled with the scars of sword practice. A few men and women in worn leathers and chainmail stood talking quietly. Geralt approached, and the conversation halted as their eyes fell on him. I'm here about the prince, Geralt said. There was a pause before one of the soldiers. A grizzled man with a scar running down his cheek stepped forward. Ulrich, he said. We've not seen him in weeks. He was a good man, a leader. He fought with us through thick and thin. But since the war, something's changed. What do you mean? Geralt asked, his tone flat. The soldier exchanged glances with the others before speaking again. He became distant, stopped confiding in us, stopped coming to the barracks. He started seeking other means of protecting the kingdom. Rumor had it he was looking into magic. Magic? Geralt repeated. Aye, the soldier said. Unusual for him. He never had much regard for it before. He always believed steel was the only thing that could keep Caleford safe. But lately, well, something changed. There was talk that he was consulting with magicians, studying ancient texts, looking for alternatives. Geralt's mind turned over the possibilities. The prince had not been skilled in magic, yet something had driven him to seek it out. Another soldier, with a harsh expression, spoke up. He spoke of threats, dangers to the kingdom that no army could fight. Said he was preparing for something bigger, something none of us could see. And none of you know where he's gone now? Geralt asked, already anticipating the answer. The older soldier shook his head. He disappeared after the princess fell. Went into hiding, they say. But if you ask me, he was searching for something. Something to save us all. The Witcher's gaze shifted, catching the unease on their faces. They spoke highly of the prince. Yet, there was something in their voices that hinted at fear. Fear of what he had become. The air in the royal chambers was thick with the scent of incense and herbs. The faint remnants of failed healing rituals clinging to the stone walls. Geralt stepped inside. At the center, in a bed too grand for the pale figure lying upon it, was Princess Illyria. Her face was peaceful, almost too still, as if sleep had claimed her completely. But Geralt had seen too many victims of dark magic to be fooled by appearances. Her hands rested over the delicate silks of her gown, but something unnatural clung to her. A faint aura, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. He stepped closer, his Witcher medallion humming faintly against his chest. The air near her was colder, and as he examined her more closely, he noticed the subtle signs, faint veins of energy barely visible under her skin, winding their way up her arms and neck. It was unmistakable. Magical tethering. A curse had bound her life force, tying it to something else, somewhere else. Geralt's eyes narrowed as he reached for the pendant around her neck, his fingers brushing against the delicate chain. The pulse of magic was stronger here, concentrated, as if the object itself was the anchor for whatever power held her. The Veilstone, he thought, was a theory, but each step of his investigation only pointed him closer to this forbidden artifact. The binding curse, the strange disappearance of Prince Ulrich, and now the unmistakable signs of life force manipulation. He was deep in thought when the door creaked open behind him. Geralt didn't turn, his senses already telling him who it was. The faint scent of rosewater preceded her arrival. Witcher. Queen Sabina's voice was low. She stood in the doorway for a moment before stepping closer, her gaze fixed on her daughter's motionless form. "Have you found anything?" Geralt straightened, but remained focused on the princess. "It's as I suspected. She's tethered. Her life is bound to something, or someone else." Sabina moved to stand beside him, her eyes dark, unreadable. "The Veilstone," she murmured, almost to herself. Geralt didn't respond. He had learned enough to know that confirming too much too soon was dangerous in matters like these, especially when a kingdom's fate could be at stake. The Queen's fingers clenched slightly at her sides, betraying the tension she tried to hide. "It's been a week now since I last saw my son." Geralt turned to her then, his golden eyes sharp. "He left without a word," Sabina continued. "No one knows where he's gone, not even his closest advisors. He disappeared the same night Illyria's condition worsened." Geralt's eyes flicked back to the princess. There was still something missing, something that tied it all together. Ulrich's involvement was no longer a question of if, why? Do you believe he is responsible? Geralt asked. Sabina's lips pressed into a thin line. I don't know what to believe, Witcher. My son would not harm his sister. Not willingly, but... She faltered, her gaze dropping to Illyria's lifeless form. The man I once knew is not the man he has become. A heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the faint sound of the wind brushing against the windows. Geralt turned his gaze to the princess again. The Veilstone's legend spoke of its ability to bind and control, a power that no mortal should wield. Yet, Ulrich had sought that power, either out of desperation or something darker. The Queen's voice, quieter now, pulled him from his thoughts. Please, Witcher, find him. Find Ulrich and bring him back before it's too late. Geralt gave a single nod, already turning towards the door. There was more to be uncovered, and the clock was ticking. Whatever Ulrich had become entangled in, it was far beyond a simple curse. It was a magic that could unravel everything. As he stepped into the dim corridor, Geralt couldn't shake the feeling that something far worse was waiting for him beyond the walls of Caelford. The halls of the palace were nearly deserted. The occasional flicker of a torch casting shadows that stretched like dark tendrils along the walls. Geralt's footsteps echoed as he approached Marin's quarters, a gnawing suspicion driving him back to the court magician. Something about the man lingered in Geralt's mind. The door to Marin's chamber was slightly ajar. Light spilled through the crack. Unnatural, faintly pulsing, like a heartbeat. Geralt pushed the door open silently, and there stood Marin, hunched over a table, muttering to himself. Symbols were scrawled hastily across the floor, and a faint glow illuminated the edges of the room. In his hands, Marin held a small crystal, its light flickering with an eerie, rhythmic pulse. Geralt's medallion thrummed against his chest. Magic. Old and dangerous. Marin, Geralt said, his voice cutting through the low whispers. The magician flinched, nearly dropping the crystal as he spun around, eyes wide. His face paled as Geralt stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a quiet click. Witcher, Marin stammered, struggling to regain his composure. I wasn't expecting. I didn't come for pleasantries, Geralt interrupted, his gaze flicking to the symbols drawn on the floor. I came for what you know. Marin's hands trembled as he set the crystal down on the table. I told you everything earlier. No. No, you didn't. The room seemed to shrink as Geralt stepped closer. Where is Ulrich? Marin hesitated, his eyes darting nervously towards the crystal. I'm not sure. Gone into hiding, I think. After the princess fell ill, he vanished. No one has seen him since. Geralt's expression didn't change, his gaze steady and unblinking. Why? The tension thickened, and Marin shifted uncomfortably. His voice, barely above a whisper. I'm not sure why. Perhaps he was trying to protect the kingdom. Geralt stepped closer, his presence looming over Marin. The Veilstone. At the mention of the name, Marin winced. Yes, it was sealed away centuries ago. But there are whispers it has been uncovered. By who? Geralt's eyes narrowed. Marin's voice dropped even lower. By the Veil Guard. Geralt's jaw tightened. He had heard that name before, in passing, never in detail, always in hushed tones, as though saying it aloud would summon something dark. The Veil Guard, a secret organization, their roots deep in manipulating the fates of kingdoms through magic and influence. It's rumored they've been working in the shadows, Marin continued. They manipulate rulers, push them towards power, always with a hidden purpose. Geralt's gaze flickered over the room. Where is the Veilstone? Marin hesitated, then sighed. I believe there's a hidden sanctum deep beneath the old ruins outside the city. That's where the Veil Guard keeps it, where they've been using its power, or so they say. The room fell into silence. Geralt turned and left. The cold air of the palace halls hitting him like a chill. The path ahead was clear, but far from simple. The Veil Guard's shadow hung over everything, and the Veilstone's power was only just beginning to stir. The wind howled through the crumbling ruins as Geralt moved cautiously towards the entrance of the hidden sanctum of the Veilstone. The sun had long dipped below the horizon, leaving only the faint glow of moonlight to guide his way. The ruins were ancient, their stones weathered by centuries of neglect, and now they stood as little more than a forgotten monument to powers that should have remained buried. As he approached, Geralt caught movement in the shadows. A lone figure stood near the entrance to the sanctum, shrouded in darkness, but unmistakable in his stance. It was Ulrich. The prince's face was worn, haggard, his once proud posture diminished. His armor was battered, and the sword at the side seemed more like a burden than a weapon. Geralt's eyes narrowed, his hand instinctively resting on the hilt of his own blade. I knew they would send for you, Ulrich said. He stepped out from the shadows, his eyes meeting Geralt's. I came for answers, Geralt replied. I know you sought the Veilstone, and I know what it's done to your sister. Ulrich's face twisted with regret. I thought it would save us all, he said, his voice trembling. The kingdom is vulnerable. I wanted to protect Caelford from the threats that linger beyond our borders. The Veil Guard promised me the power to do that. Geralt took a step closer, his gaze unrelenting. And what did they take from you in return? Ulrich lowered his head, failure evident in his every movement. They never told me the cost, he said softly. They didn't tell me it would take her life. Illyria. He swallowed hard, struggling to continue. Her life force is bound to the Veilstone. It's feeding on her, using her to fuel its power. Geralt's eyes darkened. He had suspected as much, but hearing it, confirmed, brought a cold finality to the situation. You let them use her. Ulrich's hands trembled as he clenched his fists. I didn't know, he shouted. I thought I could control it. The Veilguard. They made me believe the Veilstone was the only way to ensure peace, to protect the kingdom. But it was a lie. They manipulated me from the start. Geralt remained silent, his gaze unwavering. Ulrich's words carried the weight of his guilt, but there was more beneath the surface, more that needed to be uncovered. The Veilguard isn't just after the kingdom. What else do they want? Ulrich looked up, his eyes filled with despair. They want control, complete control over Kelford. My mother, the Queen, she made a pact with them long ago. She allowed them access to the Veilstone, thinking it might secure her reign. But now that she's grown older, they've turned their attention to me and Illyria. The Queen knew, Geralt muttered. She's been a part of this all along. Ulrich nodded, shame clouding his expression. She didn't know they would go this far. She never expected they'd use her own children to tighten their grip on the kingdom. Geralt weighed the implications in his mind. This wasn't just about magic. It was about power, control, and betrayal at the highest levels of Kelford's throne. Ulrich stepped closer, his voice pleading. I made a mistake. Terrible mistake. I have been searching how to reverse the spell. These past few weeks, I have journeyed far through the lands. I can't let it end like this. Illyria, she is trapped inside the stone. Her soul is bound to it. And as long as it exists, she'll never awake. The only way to free her is to destroy it with the spell I have learned. Geralt raised an eyebrow. And what about you? Ulrich's face twisted with bitter resolve. The stone has linked itself to me as well, in some strange way. If we destroy it, there's a chance I might not survive, or Illyria. But it's the only way to stop the Veilguard, to end this once and for all. Geralt's eyes flickered to the entrance of the sanctum. The cold wind howling through the ruins. If I help you, Caelford may fall. The Queen's alliance with the Veilguard will be exposed, and the kingdom could collapse into chaos. Ulrich's jaw tightened. Better chaos than living under their control. If the Veilguard isn't stopped, they'll drain more lives, take more souls. Illyria isn't the first, and she won't be the last. If you side with the Veilguard, Ulrich continued, Illyria stays in that coma. They'll keep their grip on the throne, and the kingdom will never truly be free. Geralt stood silent. Help Ulrich destroy the Veilstone, free Illyria, and risk political collapse. Or let the Veilguard maintain control, keep Illyria imprisoned in her coma, and save Caelford from potential chaos. He looked at Ulrich, the prince's face lined with regret. There was a finality in his gaze. A man who knew that redemption came at the highest price. I'll help you, Geralt said at last. But if you're lying to me, if this is just another game. Ulrich nodded. Yes, I know. And so, together, they stepped towards the entrance of the sanctum. The ancient stones groaning under the weight of centuries. The wind died down, and the shadows of the Veilguard's plans hung thick over the path ahead. The Veilstone waited below, and with it, the fate of Caelford. The sanctum loomed ahead, a dark, foreboding space carved deep beneath the ancient ruins. Geralt and Ulrich moved in silence. The air grew colder the deeper they descended, the oppressive weight of magic pressing down upon them. At the heart of the chamber, the Veilstone pulsed with a malevolent glow. Surrounding it, the Veilguard's elite stood in silent vigil, their cloaks hiding their faces, hands raised as they channeled the stone's power. Geralt's hand tightened around his sword. Without hesitation, he launched himself forward, steel flashing as he cut down the first of the Veil Guard. Spells flew through the air, but Geralt was faster, weaving through their attacks with the deadly precision of a witcher. Ulrich, his face set with determination, knelt before the Veilstone and began the ritual to sever his and Illyria's connection. His voice wavered as the magic resisted, but he pressed on, his hands trembling as the energy of the stone pulsed through him. One of the Veil Guard stepped forward. "You think you can stop this, Prince? The stone's power is greater than you." Ulrich gritted his teeth, his body shaking as the strain of the ritual grew. "I won't let it control us any longer." Geralt fought through the remaining Veil Guard, slashing through their ranks with lethal efficiency. But the Veilstone's power was growing unstable, cracks forming along its surface as Ulrich's ritual neared completion. The Veil Guard's leader laughed. "The stone will consume you, Prince. It will not be destroyed." But Ulrich continued, his voice rising above the chaos. The magic of the Veilstone surged, pulling at him, tendrils wrapping around his body, drawing his life force into it. His body convulsed, the strain evident in every muscle. But still, he did not falter. Geralt cut down the last of the Veil Guard's defenders. But the real battle was within Ulrich. The prince's face twisted in pain as the Veilstone began to tear at his soul. "Ulrich," Geralt called out. "It's going to kill you." Ulrich's gaze met Geralt's. "I know. I've always known. But this is the only way to save her." With a final, desperate cry, Ulrich poured the last of his strength into the ritual. The Veilstone screamed, its dark light flickering violently as the cracks spread across its surface. Geralt watched as Ulrich's body slumped, his life force draining into the stone. Then, with a deafening crack, the Veilstone shattered. A burst of light filled the chamber. The Veilstone's power evaporated, into nothing. The oppressive magic that had filled the air dissipated, leaving behind only silence. Ulrich lay still as Geralt approached, and he managed a final ragged breath. Take care of her. Make sure they know the truth. Geralt nodded, watching as Ulrich's eyes closed, his body going still. The Veilguard's plans had been undone, their power unbroken, along with the Veilstone. But the cost had been high. Ulrich was gone, and now Geralt was left to deal with the aftermath. The throne room was heavy with the weight of loss. Queen Sabina sat rigid, her face pale, as Illyria, newly awakened, stood before her. The princess's eyes were filled with grief, but also resolve. The truth of Ulrich's sacrifice had shattered the illusions that held the royal family together. Illyria's voice trembled. I know what you did, Mother. Your dealings with the Veilguard may have secured your reign, but they destroyed us. Queen Sabina said nothing. She gazed out the window, distant. She had not foreseen this, the full cost of her decisions. The throne, once solid, now wavered under the shadow of corruption. Days later, Geralt stood before the court. The whispers filled the hall as he spoke, ensuring that the truth of the prince's intentions was known, that Ulrich had not acted out of ambition, but out of a desperate desire to save the kingdom. The nobles listened. While many mourned the loss of the prince, others questioned the queen's right to rule. The Veilguard's influence had been broken, but the political future of Caelford was far from uncertain. Doubt lingered, casting a long shadow over the throne. With his task complete and coins collected, Geralt left the city of Caelford behind. The chill of autumn followed him as he rode away, his thoughts heavy with the choices he had made. Magic and power had woven a tangled web, and while the Veilguard had been weakened, their influence was not entirely extinguished. Geralt knew their reach extended far beyond Caelford, and that this battle was far from over. In the far reaches of Valen, where the fetid swamps give way to gnarled forests, lies the village of Vulcan. 'Tis a place few have heard of, and fewer still have seen, for it clings to the very edge of the whispering woods. A forest so dense and foreboding that even hardened soldiers speak of it in hushed tones. The woods loom over Vulcan like a slumbering giant, their twisted branches reaching towards the sky, as if to claw at the very heavens. By day, the forest is silent, save for the rustling of leaves and the occasional cry of a beast. But as twilight falls, they say the trees begin to whisper, sharing dark tidings that mortal ears were never meant to hear. It was on a chill autumn evening that Geralt of Rivia, the famed White Wolf, rode into Vulcan. His arrival was marked by the nervous glances of villagers who peered out from behind shuttered windows. Geralt's cat-like eyes, gleaming with an unnatural amber hue, took in every detail of the settlement. What struck him most was not the ramshackle houses or the muddy streets, but the sheer number of protective charms adoring every doorway and window. Crude effigies of straw and bone swayed in the breeze, while strings of garlic and iron horseshoes hung from eaves. The air was thick with the smell of herbs burned to ward off evil, a scent that made Geralt's sensitive nose twitch. As Roach, his loyal mare, plodded down the main street, Geralt's hand instinctively rested on the hilt of his silver sword. Something was amiss in Vulcan. That much was clear, but the true nature of the threat remained to be seen. Geralt had not come to this forsaken hamlet by chance. A fortnight past, a missive had reached him in Novigrad, bearing the seal of Alderman Yorick of Vulcan. The letter spoke of young women vanishing without a trace, of families torn asunder by grief and fear. Gold was promised, as it always was, but it was the desperation in the alderman's words that had truly caught Geralt's attention. Now, as the Witcher surveyed the frightened faces of Vulcan's inhabitants, he knew that no amount of coin would truly compensate for the task that lay ahead. Whatever dark force stalked these woods, whatever monster or magic was responsible for the disappearances, Geralt would face it for that was the Witcher's path, a road paved with danger and lined with the bones of those who had fallen along the way. Geralt dismounted Roach before a squat timber building that stood apart from the others. A crudely painted sign identified it as the alderman's house, though the Witcher needed no such indication. The stench of fear emanating from within was palpable, even to those without his heightened senses. He rapped thrice upon the door, each knock echoing in the eerie stillness that had fallen over Vulcan. After a moment's hesitation, the door creaked open, revealing a man whose face was etched with worry lines far too deep for his years. Alderman Yorick? Geralt inquired, his gravelly voice cutting through the silence. The man nodded, ushering the Witcher inside with trembling hands. The interior was dimly lit by guttering candles, their flickering light casting long shadows across the walls, adorned with even more protective charms than those outside. "You've come, Master Witcher," Yorick breathed, relief evident in his voice. I feared you might not." Geralt's piercing gaze fixed upon the alderman. "I'm here now. Tell me everything." Yorick slumped into a chair, gesturing for Geralt to do the same. "It began a month ago," he started. "Marta, the miller's daughter, vanished one night. We thought perhaps she'd run off with some lad, but then there were others." Geralt finished for him. Yorick nodded, his eyes haunted. 5 in total, all girls, all between 18 and 20 summers, taken in the night, as if by ghosts. No tracks, no signs of struggle, just gone. The Witcher's brow furrowed. Any connection between the victims? "None we can discern," Yorick replied, shaking his head. "They were from different parts of the village, different families. Some were betrothed, others not. The only common thread is their age." Geralt leaned forward, his voice low and intense. And you're certain it's not simple bandits? Human traffickers, perhaps? The alderman's face paled. No bandit could slip past our night watch undetected. Not 5 times. And there's been no ransom demands. No word at all. It's as if the woods themselves has swallowed them whole. A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the occasional pop and hiss of the candles. Finally, Geralt spoke. Your letter mentioned payment. Yorick nodded eagerly. Yes. 200 crowns, Master Witcher. It's all we could scrape together. But if you can bring our girls back, if you can end this nightmare, it's yours. Geralt's expression remained impassive. And if I only find bodies? The alderman flinched as if struck. Then at least we'll have answers. Please, Witcher. We've nowhere else to turn. The white wolf rose, his decision made. I'll need to speak with the families of the missing girls, and I'll want to see where each disappeared from. Relief washed over Yorick's features. Of course. And Witcher, he added, as Geralt turned to leave. Thank you. Geralt paused at the threshold, his silhouette framed by the doorway. Don't thank me yet, Alderman. We've yet to see what horrors lurk in your whispering woods. With that, he stepped out into the gathering gloom, ready to begin his hunt for answers, and for whatever monstrous force threatened the people of Vulcan. The Cock and Hen Tavern stood at the heart of Vulcan, a ramshackle structure that seemed to lean drunkenly against the building next to it. As Geralt pushed open the door, the usual hush that fell over a room at a witcher's entrance was tinged with a desperate hope. The tavern keeper, a portly man with a face as red as his ale, waved Geralt over. Master Witcher, he said, his voice low. A moment of your time, please. Geralt nodded, settling onto a worn stool. The keeper leaned in close, his breath heavy with the scent of cheap spirits. There's talk, you know. Old wives' tales mostly, but in times like these, he trailed off. shaking his head. What kind of talk? Geralt pressed. The keeper snorted, though there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. Nonsense about some whispering lady in the woods. Load of hogwash if you ask me, but the old-timers swear by it. Geralt's eyes narrowed. Tell me more. Well, the keeper began, lowering his voice. They say there's some spirit or whatnot in the forest. Protects the village, supposedly. But the price? He paused, glancing around nervously before continuing. They claim every 50 years a girl has to go into the woods. Voluntarily, mind you. And you don't believe this? Geralt asked, watching the man's face carefully. The keeper shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. Like I said, old wives' tales. But it's true. No girl's gone into those woods in living memory. And now, with these disappearances, he shook his head again. It's just people looking for answers, but there ain't none if you ask me. Geralt nodded slowly, processing the information. Even if the keeper didn't fully believe the tale, it was clear the legend held sway over the village. And, in Geralt's experience, such stories often held a kernel of truth, no matter how distorted by time and telling. One more thing, Geralt said, rising from his stool. Where can I find the home of the latest girl to vanish? The keeper's brow furrowed. That'd be Lena. Poor lass lived with her mother at the edge of town. Small cottage. You can't miss it. With a nod of thanks, Geralt stepped out into the gathering gloom. As he made his way through Vulcan's muddy streets, the weight of the villagers' stares heavy upon his back, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this whispering lady than mere superstition. The cottage he sought stood alone, set apart from its neighbours, as if the very ground beneath it was tainted. A hollow-eyed woman answered his knock, ushering him inside without a word. The interior was sparse, with only a few pieces of furniture adorning the single room. You're here about Lena, the woman said, her voice devoid of hope. Geralt nodded. May I see her room? The woman gestured to into a curtained-off alcove. As Geralt pulled back the fabric, his Witcher's medallion hummed against his chest. Magic lingered here, faint but unmistakable. His keen eyes scanned the small space, coming to rest on something out of place. A single flower petal resting on the pillow. It glowed with an ethereal light, pulsing gently like a living heart. "What can you tell me about the night Lena disappeared?" Geralt asked, carefully examining the petal. The mother's voice quavered as she spoke. "She's been different these past weeks. Distant, always staring at the woods, as if they were calling to her. I thought it was just a girl's fancy, but now..." Geralt turned, his expression grave. "Did she ever mention a whispering lady?" The woman's eyes widened in shock. "How did you..." Yes, she did. She said she heard singing in her dreams. Beautiful voice, promising. Promising what? Geralt pressed. "A better world," the mother whispered, tears streaming down her face. "A world without pain or fear or death. Oh God, what has become of my little girl?" Geralt's jaw clenched. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed was one of ancient magic and terrible sacrifice. Whatever force dwelt in the Whispering Woods, it was clear that Vulcan's troubles had only just begun. Geralt stepped out of Lena's cottage, the glowing petal carefully wrapped in a scrap of cloth. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood and bruise. As darkness crept over Vulcan, the whispers from the forest seemed to grow louder, more insistent. The Witcher's keen nose caught the scent of herbs and incense on the wind. Following the trail, he found himself before a small hut on the outskirts of the village. Dried plants hung from the eaves, and the air shimmered with an otherworldly haze that made Geralt's medallion hum. A wizened crone emerged from the shadows, her milky eyes fixing on Geralt with unnerving accuracy. I've been expecting you, White Wolf, she croaked. I am Mara. Geralt raised an eyebrow. You're the village herbalist, Mara cackled, the sound of dry leaves scraping stone. Herbalist, wise woman, witch, call me what you will. I know why you're here. She extended a gnarled hand. Show me. Hesitating only a moment, Geralt placed the wrapped petal in her palm. As soon as the cloth fell away, Mara gasped, her unseeing eyes widening. Moonshade, she whispered, her voice filled with awe and fear. I haven't seen this bloom in... Gods, it's been an age. What can you tell me about it? Geralt pressed. Mara's fingers traced the petal's glowing outline. It's rare, Witcher. Rarer than dragon's teeth. Grows only in places where magic runs thick in the earth. Old elfin ruins, forgotten shrines, crossroads of ley lines. Geralt's brow furrowed. And the Whispering Woods. The old woman nodded gravely. Aye, the woods. The woods. There's power there, old and hungry. The kind that demands sacrifice. The missing girls, Geralt muttered. More than that, Mara said. The Moonshade is tied to the Fey folk in our stories. Beautiful and terrible creatures, neither of this world nor fully separate from it. They entice mortals with promises of eternal youth, of a paradise beyond our realm. But their gifts always come with a price. Geralt's jaw clenched. And you believe these? They are responsible for the disappearances. Mara shrugged, handing the petal back to Geralt. I believe many things, Witcher. But I know this. Those woods are not to be trifled with. They've stood longer than Vulcan, longer than the oldest empire. They have their own rules, their own appetites. She fixed Geralt with her sightless stare, her voice taking on an eerie resonance. Be wary, White Wolf. The path you walk is treacherous. The whispering woods do not give up their secrets easily, and those who delve too deep may find themselves lost forever in a dream for which there is no waking. As if to punctuate her warning, a cold wind gusted through the village, carrying with it the faint sound of ethereal singing. Geralt turned towards the forest, his hand instinctively moving to the hilt of his sword. Whatever dwelled in those woods, be it monster, magic, or something in between, Geralt knew he would have to face it soon, and as the Witcher gazed into the impenetrable darkness of the whispering woods, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was gazing back, waiting. As dawn broke, Geralt stood at the edge of the whispering woods, his senses alert for any sign of danger. The forest loomed before him, a wall of ancient trees and twisting shadows. With a deep breath, he stepped into the gloom, the world around him transforming in an instant. The air grew thick and heavy, laden with the scent of decay and something sweeter, more alluring. Geralt's Witcher medallion thrummed against his chest, a constant reminder of the magic that saturated this place. His cat-like eyes scanned the forest floor, searching for any trace of the moonshade petals. There, a faint glimmer caught his eye. A single, luminescent petal lay nested among the dead leaves. Geralt knelt, examining it closely. It was fresh, its glow pulsing gently like a living heart. He rose, eyes narrowed, and spotted another petal a few yards ahead. The trail wound deeper into the woods, each step taking Geralt further from the world he knew. The trees grew larger, their bark twisted into faces that seemed to watch his every move. Hours passed, or perhaps days. Time seemed to lose all meaning in this place. The trail of petals led him to a hidden path, marked by ancient ruins that glowed with an inner fire. Geralt Geralt traced the symbols with a gloved hand, recognizing elements of elder speech mixed with something far older. The path stretched before him, straight and true amidst the chaos of the forest. And with no other choice, Geralt followed it, his hand never straying far from the hilt of his silver sword. Suddenly, the trees parted, revealing a clearing that took Geralt's breath away. Here, it was as if the seasons themselves had no power. Flowers bloomed alongside autumn leaves, while patches of snow lay undisturbed next to lush summer grass. At the center stood an ancient oak, its branches reaching towards a sky that seemed both day and night all at once. And there, beneath the oak, stood a figure that could only be the Whispering Lady. She was beautiful beyond mortal comprehension, her form shifting like smoke in the wind. One moment she appeared as a young maiden with flowers in her hair. The next, an ageless queen, crowned with starlight. Her eyes, when they fixed upon Geralt, held the wisdom and wildness of millennia. "Welcome, Geralt of Rivia," she spoke, her voice like music and breaking glass. "We have waited long for one such as you." Geralt's grip tightened on his sword. "You know why I'm here?" The lady nodded, a smile playing across her ethereal features. "The girls, yes, I know. But do you understand, Witcher? Do you comprehend the delicate balance you threaten to upset?" "Explain it to me," Geralt growled, his patience wearing thin. The lady's form solidified, taking on the appearance of a regal elfin queen. "Long ago, when the conjunction of spheres brought chaos to this world, a pact was forged between my kind and the people of Vulcan. We would protect them from the horrors that now roam their lands, shield them from plague and war. In exchange, every 50 years, a young maiden would join us in our realm." Geralt's eyes narrowed. "Join you? The villagers believe you devour them." A tinker tinkling laugh, like wind chimes in a storm. Mortals and their limited understanding. We do not destroy, Witcher. We transform. Those girls become one of us, guardians of the veil between worlds. They live lives of wonder and power beyond mortal dreams. And the recent disappearances? Geralt pressed. The lady's expression darkened. The cycle was broken. No maiden came willingly. So the balance shifted, and now the old hungers awaken. The woods call out, and those with ears to hear cannot resist. Geralt processed this information, his mind racing. So the girls aren't dead. Not in the way you understand death, no, the lady replied. But they can no longer return to their mortal lives. They are part of something greater now. The Witcher's jaw clenched. He had come seeking a monster to slay, but instead found something far more complex. The lady watched him, her ageless eyes filled with both sympathy and challenge. What now, Geralt of Rivia? She asked. Will you uphold this ancient pact? Or will you doom Vulcan to the horrors that lurk beyond their understanding? The weight of the decision pressed down on Geralt like a physical force. As he stood there, caught between two worlds, he knew that whatever choice he made would have far-reaching consequences for both Vulcan and the delicate balance of power in this enchanted realm. The whispering lady's form shimmered, her expression growing grave. There is more you must know, Witcher, she said. This pact protects Vulcan from more than just the everyday monsters that roam this land. Geralt's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? The lady waved her hand, and the air before them shimmered. An image formed. A vast chamber deep beneath the earth. Within it, Geralt saw a massive sarcophagus, its surface etched with symbols of warding and containment. Long before the first humans set foot in these lands, the lady explained, a higher vampire of immense power ruled this region, It was a creature of such malevolence, such hunger, that even my kind feared its wrath. The image shifted, showing scenes of devastation, entire villages reduced to ash, forests withered and dead, the land itself seeming to writhe under the vampire's influence. We managed to subdue it, to lock it away in a death-like slumber, the lady continued. But such a being cannot be truly killed. The pact, the power of the transformed maidens, it all feeds into the wards that keep the vampire contained. Geralt's jaw clenched, and now that cycle has been broken. The lady nodded. The vampire stirs. Its influence seeps out, calling to the young women of Vulcan. The recent disappearances, they are not our doing, but the result of the vampire's growing power. The Witcher paced, his mind racing. So if this pact isn't renewed, the vampire will awaken fully, the lady finished for him. And this land, perhaps all of the northern realms, will face a darkness not seen since the conjunction of the spheres. Geralt stopped, fixing the whispering lady with a piercing gaze. What would you have me do? Force innocent girls to sacrifice their lives, their humanity, to maintain this pact? The lady's form flickered, a hint of sorrow crossing her ethereal features. Is it truly a sacrifice, Witcher? To live for centuries, to wield power beyond mortal comprehension, to be part of something greater than oneself. It is not a choice they're making freely, Geralt countered. They're being lured, manipulated. And yet, the lady replied, if they are not transformed, if the pact is broken, they, and countless others, will suffer fates far worse at the hands of the vampire. Geralt fell silent, the weight of the decision pressing down upon him. On one hand, breaking the pact could free the missing girls, allow them to return to their families and live out their mortal lives. But it would also unleash a horror upon the world, one that would undoubtedly claim far more lives in the long run. On the other hand, upholding the pact would ensure the safety of Vulcan and the wider world. The vampire would remain contained, its threat neutralized. But it would mean consigning young women to a fate they didn't choose, separating from their loved ones and the lives they knew. The whispering lady watched him with both sympathy and expectation. What say you, Geralt of Rivia? Will you be the savior of a few, or the protector of many? As a witcher, he was trained to make difficult choices, to see greater good beyond immediate emotions. But as a man who had seen too much suffering, who had been forced into a life he didn't choose, could he really condemn others to a similar fate? The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting for Geralt's decision. Whatever he chose, he knew would shape the fate of this land for generations to come. Geralt emerged from the whispering woods as dawn broke over Vulcan. The weight of his decision heavy upon his shoulders. The village stirred to life, anxious eyes turning to the Witcher as he made his way to the alderman's house. Word of his return spread quickly, and by the time he reached Yorick's door, a crowd had gathered. Alderman Yorick ushered Geralt inside. The village elders, summoned hastily, crowded into the small room. The air was thick with tension as Geralt recounted his encounter in the woods, explaining the true nature of the pact and the looming threat of the ancient vampire. As he finished, a heavy silence fell over the room. Yorick's face had grown ashen, his hands trembling as he gripped the edge of the table. "So," he said, "we must sacrifice our daughters to save ourselves." Geralt's jaw clenched. Not sacrifice. Transform. But yes, the pact must be renewed or the consequences will be dire. One of the elders, an old woman with eyes like flint, spoke up. "And who are we to choose? Which family must bear this burden?" "It must be voluntary," Geralt replied, remembering the whispering lady's words. "The magic won't work otherwise." Murmurs of disbelief and anger rippled through the room. Yorick raised his hands, calling for quiet. We must inform the village. Let them know what's at stake. Perhaps someone will step forward. The news spread through Vulcan like wildfire. As the sun reached its zenith, the entire village gathered in the square. Geralt stood beside Yorick as the alderman explained the situation, his voice cracking with emotion. The Witcher watched the crowd, seeing fear, anger, and despair wash over their faces. We need a volunteer, Yorick concluded, his eyes scanning the assembled villagers. Someone to become the next guardian, to protect us all. Silence fell, heavy and oppressive. Mothers clutched their daughters close, while young women stared at the ground, unable to meet the pleading gazes of their neighbors. The moment stretched on, the tension building until it seemed something must break. And then a clear voice rang out. I'll do it. The crowd parted, revealing a young woman with fiery red hair and eyes that burned with determination. Liliana, the alderman's daughter, strode forward, her head held high. Gasps and cries of shock rippled through the gathering. Yorick stumbled forward, his face pale with horror. Lily, no. No, you can't. I can, Father, Liliana interrupted. And I will. You've always taught me that leadership means sacrifice. Let me prove myself worthy of that lesson. Geralt watched the scene unfold, his expression unreadable. He'd seen courage in many forms throughout his long life, but this was something rare indeed. Liliana turned to face the crowd. I go willingly to protect our village, our families, our future. Do not mourn for me, for I will become something greater, a guardian watching over you all. Tears streamed down the faces throughout the square. Yorick embraced his daughter, his body shaking with silent sobs. As Geralt looked on, he couldn't help but wonder if he'd made the right choice in bringing this burden to Vulcan. But as Liliana met his gaze, he saw something that gave him hope. The spirit of humanity, facing the darkness with courage and sacrifice. The die was cast. The pact would be renewed. But the cost, Geralt knew, would be etched into the heart of this village for generations to come. As twilight descended upon Vulcan, Geralt and Liliana set out for the Whispering Woods. The village watched in somber silence as they passed, many reaching out to touch Liliana's hand or whisper words of gratitude. At the forest's edge, Yorick embraced his daughter one last time, his grief palpable in the fading light. The forest seemed to part before them, the path to the Fey glade clearer than before. Yet Geralt's witcher senses prickled with unease. Something was wrong. The woods were too quiet, the shadows too deep. "Stay close," he murmured to Liliana. They had scarcely gone a mile when the attack came. Shapes burst from the undergrowth, pale, twisted things with elongated limbs and razor-sharp claws. Vampire thralls, their minds enslaved by their ancient master's will. Geralt's sword flashed in the gloom, silver meeting flesh with deadly precision. "Run," he shouted to Liliana, but the girl stood her ground, snatching up a fallen branch to defend herself. Together, they fought their way through the woods, Geralt's blade singing a deadly song, while Liliana showed surprising skill with her makeshift weapon. But for every thrall they felled, two more seemed to take its place. "We're close," Geralt panted, recognizing landmarks from his previous journey. "Just a little further." They burst into the Fey glade. The sudden light momentarily blinding them. The Whispering Lady stood waiting, her form shimmering with power. Without a word, she raised her hand, and a shimmering barrier sprang up around the clearing, holding the vampire thralls at bay. Quickly, the lady urged. The ritual must begin. Liliana stepped forward. The lady guided her to the center of the glade, where a circle of moonshade flowers bloomed. As Liliana took her place within the circle, Geralt turned to face the barrier. The vampire thralls hurled themselves against it, their screeches filling the air. Cracks began to appear in the magical shield. How long will it hold? Geralt called over his shoulder, readying his sword. Long enough, the lady replied, but only if it is not breached. You must hold the line, Witcher. The ritual began, the lady's voice rising in an unearthly chant. The moonshade flowers pulsed with light, their glow enveloping Liliana. The girl gasped, her body arcing as the magic took hold. Geralt had no time to watch. The barrier shattered, and the thralls poured into the glade. He met them with steel, his blade a blur of motion. Igni flames searing the air. But they kept coming. An endless tide of nightmarish forms. Behind him, Liliana's gasps turned to screams. The magic built to a crescendo, the very air humming with power. Geralt risked a glance over his shoulder and saw Liliana hovering above the ground, her body wreathed in light. With a final, earth-shaking pulse of energy, the ritual reached its climax. Liliana's scream cut off abruptly, replaced by a sound like shattering crystal. When Geralt looked again, she was gone. In her place stood a being of light and shadow, ethereal and terrible in its beauty. The vampire thralls recoiled, shrieking in terror. The newly transformed Liliana raised her hand, and a wave of pure force swept them away, scattering them like leaves in a glade. Silence fell. Geralt lowered his sword. The whispering lady nodded in satisfaction, her form already beginning to fade. "It is done," she said. "The pact is renewed. Vulcan is safe." Geralt turned to the being that had been Liliana. Her eyes, now pools of starlight, met his. For a moment, he saw a small flicker of the girl she had been. Brave, determined, self-sacrificing. Then it was gone, taken by the vast, alien consciousness of a Fey guardian. "Thank you, Geralt of Rivia," Liliana's voice echoed at once. "I will watch over them, as always." As Geralt made his way back through the now quiet forest, he couldn't shake the feeling that while a great evil had been averted, the price had been higher than anyone truly understood. The weight of his choices, of the lives forever altered by his actions, would stay with him long after he left Vulcan behind. Dawn broke over Vulcan, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose. The village stirred to life. The air thrummed with an otherworldly energy, a reminder of the night's momentous events. Geralt stood at the edge of the Whispering Woods, his keen senses alert for any lingering threat. But the forest was calm. The malevolent presence of the vampire and its thralls notably absent. In the distance, he could feel the combined power of the Fey Guardians, a shimmering veil of protection enveloping the land. Yorick approached, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Grief warred with relief in his eyes as he gazed towards the woods where his daughter had vanished. "Is it truly over?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Geralt nodded solemnly. "The immediate threat is gone. The pact has been renewed, and the Guardian's power holds the vampire at bay." Yorick's shoulders sagged, whether from relief or sorrow. Geralt couldn't tell. The alderman reached into his coat, producing a pouch heavy with coin. "Your payment, Master Witcher," he said, holding it out. "Though it seems a paltry sum for what you've done, and what we've lost." Geralt hesitated before taking the pouch. The weight of it felt insignificant compared to the weight of his choices. "Your daughter's sacrifice saved countless lives," he said, trying to offer some comfort. Yorick's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I know. And yet..." They stood in silence for a moment, the unspoken price of their victory hanging heavy between them. Finally, Geralt shouldered his pack and turned to Roach, who waited patiently nearby. "It's time I moved on," he said. Yorick nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Will you return someday?" Geralt paused, one foot in the stirrup. "Perhaps," he replied, though they both knew it was unlikely. As he rode out of Vulcan, Geralt could feel the eyes of the villagers upon him. Some looked on with gratitude, others with resentment. He had saved them, yes, but he had also irrevocably changed their world. The simplicity of their lives had been shattered, replaced by the knowledge of ancient pacts and otherworldly guardians. The road stretched before him, winding away towards new contracts, new monsters, new choices. Geralt's mind turned over the events in Vulcan, examining his decisions from every angle. He had faced similar dilemmas before: the lesser evil, the greater good. But each time, the weight of those choices seemed to grow heavier. As Vulcan faded into the distance behind him, Geralt allowed himself a moment of reflection. The life of a witcher was never simple, never black and white. It existed in shades of grey, in the murky waters of morality, but there were rarely clear right answers. Geralt spurred Roach onward, his face set in grim determination. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it as he always had, with steel, with silver, and with the burden of choice upon his shoulders. The walls of Blackhaven rose against the grey sky, their towering stone battlements cutting a stark silhouette in the distance. Geralt of Rivia rode steadily along the winding road. The rhythmic clop of Roach's hoofs providing a steady backdrop to the silence of the autumn morning. Unlike most cities he passed through, where the sounds of life and trade spilled far beyond the gates, Blackhaven's approach felt unnervingly subdued. There was no laughter from passing merchants, idle chatter from travellers. Only a low murmur of voices, hushed and guarded, carried on the wind. As he neared the gate, Geralt's keen senses caught the flickers of wary glances from the guards stationed above. They stood stiffly, their eyes shadowed by helmets, and their hands gripped the hilts of their swords tighter than normal. A soft, unnatural tension hung in the air, a warning for anyone who dared linger too long. Geralt slowed Roach to a trot, his amber eyes scanning the surroundings. Blackhaven was known as a prosperous trade hub, a city of commerce and wealth, its streets typically bustling with merchants, entertainers, and townsfolk. But as he entered through the grand gates, there was an undeniable sense of unease clinging to the cobbled streets. People moved quickly, heads down, avoiding each other's eyes, their faces pale with fear that spoke of something far more sinister than the usual dangers of city life. Geralt's gaze flicked to the marketplace, where normally the scent of baked goods and the rattle of coins would fill the air. Instead, half the stalls were closed, their shutters bolted, as if bracing for an unseen storm. The few merchants that remained traded in whispers, their hands moving nervously as they passed goods without a word. Something was deeply wrong here. Word of a mysterious plague had reached him, a strange affliction that turned the townsfolk of Blackhaven to stone, trapping them in their final moments of terror. It wasn't the first time Geralt had heard tales of curses and deadly enchantments. The scale of the panic he now saw suggested something was different, something far darker. He guided Roach to the side of the road, dismounting near a well-worn path leading to the city's main square. A statue stood in the center, but unlike the grand figures of past heroes, this one was hauntingly real. Too real. The figure of a woman, frozen in mid-scream, her arms stretched out in terror, as if trying to flee some unseen horror. Her face was twisted in anguish, and the stone seemed to shimmer faintly in the muted sunlight, as though life itself had been caught and solidified in its final moments. Geralt approached the statue, his medallion humming faintly beneath his armor. Magic, old, powerful, and unforgiving, clung to the stone like a second skin. He crouched down, examining the details of the transformation, the unnatural smoothness of the stone, the way it captured every detail of the woman's despair. The plague wasn't simply killing these people, it was trapping them forever. The sound of hurried footsteps approached, and Geralt rose to meet the man who had called him here. A tall, broad-shouldered figure, wearing the deep green and silver colors of Blackhaven's guard, stopped a few paces away. His face was etched with lines of exhaustion and fear, but he forced a stiff smile as he nodded his greeting. "Witcher," the man said, "Mayor Thornwood is expecting you." Geralt gave a short nod, his gaze lingering on the statue for a moment longer, before turning toward the city hall, already sensing the weight of a deeper mystery unfolding before him. City Hall's stone walls seemed to swallow the light, casting long shadows across the somber chamber. Geralt stepped inside, where Mayor Cedric Thornwood stood by the window, his back tense. "Witcher," the mayor greeted, turning with a weary look. "You've seen the statues?" Geralt nodded, his eyes falling on a figure of stone in the corner. A man, frozen mid-scream, terror etched into his face. "Councilman," Cedric muttered. "One of many." "What caused it?" Geralt asked, already sensing a deeper layer to this mystery. Cedric hesitated. "There are whispers, curses, ancient magic. It started, supposedly, after strange lights were seen in the harvest woods. We sent men to investigate. None returned." Geralt crossed his arms, expecting more. Cedric met his gaze, but said nothing. And then, "We'll pay you generously. The answers lie in those woods." Geralt studied him, sensing there was more than the mayor let on. "I'll find out." The Cock and Lantern Tavern was a dimly lit, low-ceilinged place where fear clung to the air like smoke. Geralt stepped inside, immediately drawing the nervous glances of its patrons. The usual clatter of cups and quiet laughter was replaced by murmured conversations, most of them centered around the strange plague haunting Black Haven. He took a seat near the hearth, where two men spoke in hushed tones. One leaned closer to his companion. "Saw it myself. Lights in the harvest woods. Like something unnatural's brewing out there." The other man nodded, his eyes darting toward Geralt. "And they say old Gideon Ashcroft is involved. That alchemist. Always meddling with things better left alone." Geralt's ears perked up at the mention of the name. "Ashcroft?" he asked. One of the men hesitated. "Aye, it was said he was exiled for his dangerous experiments. But rumor has it he never stopped. Lived somewhere deep in the woods." Geralt paid for his drink, filing away the name and the whispers. Whatever was happening in Blackhaven, Gideon Ashcroft might have some answers. The harvest woods stretched before Geralt. Twisted maze of ancient trees shrouded in mist. His medallion vibrated faintly, alerting him to the magic in the air. Each step felt heavier, as though the forest itself resisted his presence. Silence clung to the woods, broken only by the occasional creak of a branch swaying in the wind. Ahead, a figure emerged from the fog, graceful, calm, and seemingly part of the woods themselves. Her robes blended into the greenery, her hair entwined with vines. She approached with the ease of someone who had no fear of the dangers lurking around. "You've come to search for the source," the woman said softly, her eyes meeting his. "But it's not here." Geralt remained silent, studying her. "The plague that's turning people to stone. You know of it?" She nodded. "The answers you seek lie not in these woods, but beneath the city." "And what of Gideon Ashcroft?" Geralt asked, watching her closely. Her expression didn't change, but there was a brief flicker in her eyes, something she quickly masked. "I know the name, but if you think he's behind this, then you might be mistaken. He was exiled long ago and hasn't been seen since." Geralt's gaze sharpened. She was lying, or at least not telling the full truth. His medallion hummed again. Something wasn't right. "You seem certain," he said flatly. Her gaze held his, calm but unyielding. "My name is Elowen. I've lived in these woods for years. If he were here, I would know." The air between them thickened, tension crackling beneath her serene exterior. Geralt said nothing more, but as he turned to leave, he knew Elowen was hiding something. Whatever it was, it would need to be uncovered. Just not here, and not now. The narrow streets of Blackhaven twisted into forgotten corners where abandoned buildings stood like relics of a city that had tried to forget its secrets. Geralt's instincts led him to one such structure, its door hanging loosely on rusted hinges. Inside, the stench of mildew and decay filled the air, but something else lingered beneath it. Alchemy. Moving cautiously, Geralt found a trap door hidden beneath a worn rug. With a grunt, he lifted it, revealing a staircase that spiraled down into the earth. The descent was cold and silent, and at the bottom, a heavy wooden door barred his way. It creaked open, revealing a gigantic hidden laboratory, a maze untouched by time. Along the walls of the maze, shelves lined the walls, filled with jars of strange herbs, crystals, and tools of alchemical craft. Soon, he found a table cluttered with scrolls and vials, the remnants of ongoing experiments. Geralt's sharp eyes caught sight of a stack of notes, one page bearing the signature G.A. He scanned the documents quickly. They detailed experiments on harnessing elemental earth magic, using it to petrify living beings. His gaze darkened as he realized the implications. Among the notes, a name kept appearing: Lyra, an assistant who worked at the local potion shop. She had obviously helped with some of these experiments. Folding the papers, Geralt pocketed them and turned towards the exit. He had a new lead, and he intended to follow it. The potion shop sat on a quiet street, its door half open, the smell of herbs and brewing concoctions spilling into the cool air. Inside, Lyra, a young woman with sharp eyes and ink-stained fingers, glanced up as Geralt entered. "I'm here about Gideon Ashcroft," Geralt said, watching her closely. Lyra's expression faltered. "Gideon," she repeated, feigning ignorance poorly. "He hasn't been in Blackhaven for years." "His work says otherwise," Geralt replied, pulling the notes from his pocket and placing them on the counter. Lyra swallowed, glancing at the documents. I only assisted him. I didn't know what he was truly planning." "Didn't know or didn't want to know?" Geralt asked. She exhaled shakily. "I think he was obsessed with immortality. Thought he could manipulate the forces of life and death. He was exiled for it, but I don't think anything would stop him." Geralt's gaze narrowed. "Is he the cause of this plague?" I don't know," she whispered, clearly terrified. "But whatever's happening, he's involved. I'm sure of it." Geralt gave a curt nod, his suspicions confirmed. Ashcroft had to be found before the plague consumed the entire city. Geralt entered Mayor Cedric's office, the lavish furnishings doing little to soften the tension between them. Cedric stood behind his desk, his expression calm but guarded. "I found the name Gideon Ashcroft," Geralt said, tossing notes onto the desk. "He's been experimenting. You knew about this, didn't you?" Cedric's face tightened, but he quickly shook his head. "Ashcroft was exiled long ago for his dangerous work. If he's returned, it's not with my blessing." Geralt stepped closer. "I know you're involved in this, Cedric." The mayor stiffened and waved his hands. "I told you, if you want the truth, to find Gideon, then it's in the Harvest Woods. Elowen, the druidess, She's the key to all of this, I'm sure of it. She's been meddling in ancient magics, far beyond her control. Geralt studied Cedric's face, sensing his desperation to divert attention. You want me to believe the Druidess is behind this? I'm telling you that's where I think the answers are, Cedric snapped. Elowen knows more than she lets on. You'll see. The deflection was clear, but Geralt said nothing more. As he left the mayor's office, suspicion weighed heavily on his mind. Cedric was hiding something, and he was trying very hard to keep Geralt's focus away from the city. Twilight filtered through the trees as Geralt found Elowen in a secluded glade. Her presence as calm as the forest itself. But there was a tension in the air, and Geralt sensed the weight of secrets. Cedric sent me, Geralt said. He believes you're the cause of this plague, as does half the city. Elowen's eyes flickered with irritation, but she quickly masked it. Of course they would say that. Then tell me the truth, Geralt demanded. What's really going on here? Elowen sighed, stepping closer. Years ago, Cedric and Gideon Ashcroft led a project, an attempt to harness elemental petrification. I believe it was supposed to be a weapon, something they could control. But they lost control and tested it on their own people. Geralt's eyes narrowed. And you did nothing? I tried to stop it, Elowen said. But they pushed ahead, driven by greed and ambition. Now the plague is out of hands, and Cedric wants to stop it and cover it up. But I don't know what's still causing it. The truth hit hard. Cedric had sent Geralt to the woods to throw him off the real trail. He had to return to the city, and fast. The grand hall of Blackhaven City Council was filled with the murmurs of townspeople and council members alike as Geralt strode in, his boots echoing against the marble floor. Tension rippled through the crowd as the Witcher, known for his cold efficiency and truth-seeking, made his way to the raised platform where the mayor stood. Cedric, flanked by his councilman, met Geralt's gaze. "What is the meaning of this, Witcher?" Cedric asked. Geralt stood, letting the weight of the moment settle over the gathered crowd. He held the room's attention like a predator stalking its prey. "I've uncovered the truth about the plague," Geralt said. "It didn't come from the woods. It came from experiments you and Gideon Ashcroft conducted. Experiments you failed to control." A murmur ran through the hall as council members exchanged uneasy glances. Cedric's expression tightened, but he quickly schooled his features into a mask of indignant authority. "That's a lie," Cedric said. "Ashcroft acted alone. His exile was proof enough that we—" "You knew," Geralt interrupted. "You knew about the project. You supported it. You funded it. When it spiraled out of control, you tried to cover it up. And now people are dying, turned to stone because of your greed." The crowd gasped, and the council members began to murmur again. Cedric's mask of control cracked for a moment. "It was never supposed to happen this way," Cedric shouted. "Ashcroft was the one who twisted this project. He sabotaged everything." Geralt's gaze bore into him. "You didn't stop him. You sent me on a fool's errand into the woods to deflect suspicion. You were hoping I wouldn't dig deep enough to uncover the truth." Cedric's fists clenched at his sides. "You don't understand, Witcher. The project was meant to protect Blackhaven. We were trying to create a defense against our enemies. Gideon, he became obsessed, twisted the magic. We had no idea it would go this far. Your defense was built on the backs of innocent lives." Geralt shot back. "You and your council tested it on your own people. The plague wasn't an accident. It was the result of your reckless ambition." The room fell into a tense silence. The councilmen stared at Cedric, horror dawning on their faces as they realized the depths of the conspiracy. Cedric, desperate now, lashed out. "We had no choice," Cedric barked. "Blackhaven was vulnerable. We needed something to protect us. Gideon,
Gideon promised control, but he was mad. This is his doing, not mine. You let him do it, Geralt said. You had the power to stop him, and you didn't. Cedric's face twisted with anger, but beneath it lay fear. Fear of a man caught in a web of his own making. I tried to fix it, Cedric said. I thought if we stopped him we could contain it. But now it's too late. Gideon's still out there, using the magic he created. He's the real danger. I thought he must be in those woods. Geralt took a step back, letting the room absorb Cedric's admission. The crowd, once filled with hushed mummers, now looked to Geralt for his next move. The true villain was clear now. Gideon Ashcroft, the one who had taken Cedric's greed and turned it into something far darker. The people of Blackhaven deserve the truth, Geralt said, and they deserve justice. Cedric's shoulders slumped, the weight of his guilt pressing down on him. There was no escaping what he'd done, but there was still one more reckoning to come, and that would be Gideon Ashcroft. The maze beneath Blackhaven twisted and turned. Stone corridors of a laboratory, cold and damp with age. Geralt moved with silent precision, each step careful, his senses highly attuned to the magic embedded in the walls. Dim, flickering light revealed traps. He dismantled them methodically, his focus unbroken. The path narrowed, leading him deeper into the bowels of the city. This maze was much larger than he imagined. And ahead, the faint glow of something unnatural pulsed rhythmically. The magic in the air was palpable now, humming with a dangerous intensity. Geralt tightened his grip on his sword, knowing he was close to Gideon's lair. The chamber Geralt stepped into was vast, its ceiling disappearing into darkness. At its center, a glowing elemental core surged with raw, unstable power, bathing the room in a sickly light. Gideon Ashcroft stood before it, his frail figure silhouetted against the swirling energy. "You found me," Gideon said, a grim smile on his lips. "I knew you would." Geralt's eyes swept the room, assessing the core's power. "You've twisted magic into a plague, turned people into stone. You're not saving Blackhaven, you're destroying it." Gideon's smile faded. "You don't understand. This city is rotten to its core. Cedric and the Council, they were going to use this power for control. I'm tearing down their empire of corruption. And in the process, you're killing innocents," Geralt said. "Innocents?" Gideon scoffed. "They're complicit in the rot. They must be cleansed, and from that something greater will rise here." Geralt's hand hovered near his sword. "You've justified your madness long enough." Gideon's eyes blazed with defiance. "You can't stop what's coming, Witcher. This city will fall, and I'll be the one to rebuild it." The energy from the core crackled through the chamber. Geralt steeled himself. Gideon's twisted vision had to end. "You know, the Council is corrupt," Gideon pressed. "They would have used this power to crush their enemies, to tighten their grip. I'm offering freedom." "That's not freedom," Geralt said. "You've become what you claim to fight against." Gideon stepped closer. "You understand sacrifice, Witcher. Sometimes we have to destroy the old to build something better. Join me. Help me fix this city." Geralt's gaze hardened. "You think all this death can be justified? I don't cross that line. No one should." Gideon sneered. "You're blind to the greater good." Before Gideon could continue, a soft footfall echoed through the chamber. Elowen emerged from the shadows. "Elowen," Geralt said, suspicion etching his voice. "What are you doing here?" Gideon's eyes widened in recognition. "Sister." Geralt's hand instinctively moved to his sword. "Sister?" Elowen stepped between them, raising her hands. "Enough. This madness has to end." Gideon's tone softened. I did this for us, for Blackhaven, to protect you from them. Tears welled in Alwyn's eyes. I know you did, Gideon. I wanted change too, but you've let it consume you. Geralt watched them. We can still stop this, Alwyn pleaded, but not with more death. This ends now, brother. The tension in the chamber shifted. Family, vengeance, and loyalty clashed with the fate of Blackhaven hanging in the balance. The chamber vibrated with raw, chaotic energy. The elemental core surging dangerously, casting flashes of light and shadow across the walls. Cracks formed in the floor, tendrils of magic spilling out like wildfire. Elowen rushed towards the core, her hands moving swiftly through ancient gestures, trying to stabilize it before it tore the entire chamber apart. Gideon stood between her and Geralt, his hands crackling with magic. You won't stop me, Witcher. This city needs to be purged. I'll make sure of it. Geralt's blade flashed as he charged forward, meeting Gideon's magic with a combination of skill and strategy. Steel clashed against arcane power, sparks flying as the two locked in a deadly dance. You're blinded by your hate, Geralt spat, deflecting a blast of energy. This isn't justice. It's the only way, Gideon shouted, his attacks becoming more frantic. You've seen the corruption for yourself. Elowen struggled with the core, her face etched with strain. Geralt, I need more time. Geralt sidestepped another strike, pushing closer to Gideon. Killing them won't fix this. You're no savior. You're a destroyer. Their weapons clashed again, but this time, Geralt saw weakness in Gideon's movements, his desperation fueling his power, but also blinding him. In a swift motion, Geralt knocked Gideon off balance. His blade pressed close to the alchemist's throat. End this, Geralt growled. The chamber shuddered violently, cracks spreading as the core destabilized further. Gideon's eyes flashed with defiance. But as he lay pinned beneath Geralt's blade, something in his gaze shifted. The madness flickered, replaced briefly by regret. Do it, Gideon hissed. Finish me off.
Geralt's grip tightened, but he didn't move to strike. Instead, he bound Gideon's hands, pulling him roughly to his feet. I won't become like you. Gideon's face twisted. You think mercy will save them? You're a fool, Witcher. Geralt didn't stop, dragging Gideon away from the core as Elowen chanted faster, her voice rising above the chaos. The core flickered, then pulsed, releasing a final surge of magic before collapsing in on itself. Leaving the chamber in silence, Gideon slumped in Geralt's grip, his energy spent. You've doomed them all, he muttered weakly. No, you did that long ago, replied Geralt. With the elemental threat neutralized, the chamber started to crumble around them, but Blackhaven still had a chance, thanks to the Witcher. The central square of Blackhaven buzzed with attention as a crowd murmured, murmurs of uncertainty filling the air. Geralt stood at the forefront, Elowen by his side, as they faced the citizens and council members. The evidence of the conspiracy, the documents, the admissions from Gideon and Cedric, lay bare for all to see. This plague wasn't a curse, Geralt said. It was created here, by your leaders. An experiment with forbidden magic. They sought to weaponize this magic, but it spiraled out of control. Elowen stepped forward. Blackhaven can heal, but it starts with acknowledging the truth. Corruption must end. Days later, Blackhaven was a city in upheaval. Mayor Cedric and several of his conspirators had been arrested, their fate now in the hands of the law. The streets were still tense, but there was an undercurrent of hope, a sense that something was changing. Geralt watched from a distance as Gideon Ashcroft, bound and subdued, was led away by the guards. The alchemist's expression, a mix of bitterness and defeat. This isn't over, Gideon mustered, casting a final glance at Geralt. The city will fall. Maybe, but not today. The sun hung low over the harvest woods as Geralt prepared to leave Blackhaven behind. At the edge of the city,
Elowen approached. "Thank you, Witcher," she said softly, handing him a coin. "You've given this city a chance to rebuild. I hope we can undo the damage." Geralt nodded, adjusting Roach's saddle. "You've done your part. The rest is up to them." Elowen smiled faintly. "It won't be easy, but I'll stay and help however I can. Maybe there's hope for this place after all." There was a quiet understanding between them. Two who had seen too much, but still carried a glimmer of hope. "Take care, Elowen," Geralt said, "and stay out of trouble." As Geralt rode away from Blackhaven, the city slowly fading into the distance, his thoughts drifted back to the events that unfolded. The corruption, the lies, the sacrifices. It was a reminder of the blurred lines between right and wrong, of how easily power could twist good intentions into something darker. The road ahead stretched out before him, quiet and empty. Geralt knew the world wasn't black and white. There were always shades of grey, difficult choices and unseen consequences. But as the wind brushed against his face, he found some solace in knowing that, for now, he had done what was right. That, in the end, was all he could offer.